Hey everyone, and welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. I hope you're all having a great night. Very excited about our guest tonight. That is, she goes on most of the socials as Bébête Coquette. Her name is Christina. So welcome to the show, Bébête Coquette. Hello.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. This is really awesome.
Let's get to it. How did you, well, first of all, how do you identify?
She, her,
Okay.
like
And,
trans femme. Yeah.
okay, that's a trans femme. How did you choose your name?
It's the feminine version of my name,
Mm-hmm.
and I like my name, so it was easy for me, and not necessarily my job to make it easier for other people, but it was easy for them as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, making it easier on others makes it sort of easier on you too. It's a win-win.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if I really had like conflicts with my name, like I would have. I did change my middle name because I had a huge conflict with it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my first name was good. I always liked it. So
So, Christina, when did you first realize you were different? Usually, when we realize we're transgender and we get all the way to the end, we can look back and see the breadcrumbs that were there as a kid. What were some of those breadcrumbs? What were some of those early indications that this would be your eventual fate?
um, there were a lot of things like in my adolescence and through my teens and 20s and 30s that like in hindsight it's like oh okay that was it, but I had gender non-conforming like behaviors, like underclothes dress and stuff like that from the time of like the first instance that I can remember, um because it was also the first instance that I learned to hide it was in second grade. um I had worn some silky thing under and I showed a friend and they pointed and laughed and got everybody's attention. So that went in the vault. And
Mm.
along through like as I grew up, I had you know um fantasy and stuff that wasn't completely cis normative, het cis normative especially.
Mm.
And
That you wouldn't come to realize until much, much later, right?
yeah, no, I mean, it's like I had no idea what these things meant, other than the fact that I was different. So it was much, much later.
Yeah, I wonder how many trans people have that story of the early shaming where they tried to share something with somebody and then got that that just moment of sheer shame from that person. And it's just like, oh, I can never do that again. We've had plenty of stories where it was a parent or somebody that caught it and said, oh no, you can't ever do that. So when did you first realize that you were trans? When did your egg crack?
Well, it was January to February or so in 2019. I um, I had gotten to a point with my ex where um, they were more comfortable with me expressing that side of me while we were alone in our room, private.
So it was
And
something you
that
were already kind of exploring with them, or was more you were more out about?
yeah, it was something. I mean, we had had years of struggle with her, like her having feelings about it that would send me back and forth, into the cycle of I can't not do this. If I do this anymore, I'm going to ruin everything.
Yeah.
And we had gotten to a point to where she was more comfortable with it. And
Okay.
so as I started to not feel like I had to hide it, I started to kind of look around, and see what those questions are. Is like, why do I always want to cross dress? Why do I always come back to it? And um through a few steps I learned about, um what is it, oh, what do they call it, cross dreamers. And
Okay.
then I heard about what is the really like the bad science thing, autogynephilia.
Okay.
Yeah, and which is terrible, terrible science and everything, but it actually like was a doorway for me to find good information.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I
Okay.
found, yeah, I found the egg in real life subreddit and was reading through people's experiences. And I finally, went to like, am I trans subreddit or something like that, and read through some folks, and reading through their like the list of things that they had, like in their lives, I it was like exactly like my story. Like I literally read the same things that I had done and felt, my whole life, in their words. And
Mm-hmm.
that was when the bottom kind of fell out of my stomach, because
Yeah.
the the internalized desire to be me was so strong at times, but like beyond that, it seemed impossible. And to see that those feelings that I had been going through for all of those years were exactly the same thing that people said, that indicated to them, because my desire to be a woman could not have been that, could not have been me being trans. It just must have been like me not just like not being strong enough to put it away.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wrong.
Yeah.
And so from there, it kind of snowballed.
Okay.
And I figured it out, and I will say my egg crack day is like, I think the 8th or 9th of February,
Mm-hmm.
and I was on hormones by um the middle, close to the end of the month after.
Mm.
I ended up getting in with a doctor really early, and like really quickly, because I guess they had a cancellation or something.
So
And
you just went straight for it, huh?
yeah, yeah, because I didn't have any time to waste.
Huh.
Like knowing what I like knew at that point, and how I felt my whole life, I had to start. I had to
Hmm.
start immediately.
Wow. So that's so interesting. First, I want to focus on what that initial feeling was for you, because you're finally able to get some information about what this is and sort of the why. But it is very clear for you that the answer is you're transgender. Did that cause any internal struggles for you? You said your stomach kind of fell at that point. Was it one of those where it was equal parts, wonderful to have that answer, but also kind of scary because of what that meant for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to know that, like, oh, I am, it was amazing. But, at the time, I was like, this, I mean, I was really afraid,
Mm-hmm.
because I, a lot of the same fears that older trans girls have, like I'm too old,
Mm-hmm.
I have an established life and a family. What is it going to mean to them? And how, like, am I going to, is it even worth it at this point in my life?
Yeah.
Because I'm not, one of the lucky ones of, the more current, generation of trans girls and trans men and non-binary folks that, that got to do it late. And so, late like chronologically, but early for them.
Yeah.
So they have that advantage of never having, you know been, poisoned by the sex hormones that weren't for them.
Yeah. So then moving on, and you've gotten to this point where you've accepted it. And as soon as you accepted it, it sounds like you're like, okay, I'm ready to go. Let's do this. First, let's talk about that a second.
Mm.
What was it that I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around how you were able to go from that struggle of realizing, oh crap, I'm trans, to I'm trans, I accept it, and I'm going for it.
It had been something that I had been dreaming of for so many years, that I could not go for it. Once you know, like once I knew that what I was feeling wasn't just, you know, a thing.
Hmm.
Once I kind of understood that cis people don't think about being the opposite gender, um, you know, I was like, oh, well, I gotta do this. um, you know, I like I had I had the misfortune, I guess, of having gynecomastia, which is a condition where natal men, males have breast tissue since I was in since puberty, pretty much.
Mm.
And so, you know, I could, I could, I could, you know, hold myself. And when I saw myself in the mirror like that, like for such a long time, I could already see, and I'm, you know, I'm curvy. I was a chunky babe anyway, and so, so you know, I could see myself in the mirror, and like everything from the neck down, you know, I could look at it and be happy about that, even though like in public it was excruciating to have to, like, I wore compression shirts and
Yeah.
you know, almost like a binder,
Hmm.
and you know, wore baggy clothes my whole life to hide the shape of my body.
Yeah, that's got to be
And
the. It's so unfair because that's like the sort of the best thing that you could wish as a trans person, and then kind of the worst thing as someone who's trans and not out with their egg cracked. You're just trying to fit in and trying to do the cis male thing because it's really hard and it doesn't feel right, but you feel like that's what you're supposed to be doing. So you're focusing on that. Gosh, that's brutal.
it's like a constant thing, like, you know, the same way that dysphoria, like it was dysphoria. You know, like I had been experiencing dysphoria for my whole life
Yeah.
because I thought that I was cis and I had these features that were really obviously not. So,
Yeah.
you know, like, and after my egg cracked, and I could, you know, like I knew my dysphoria got worse because at that point, like I knew,
Mm.
and I am probably one of the most impatient people that I know.
Okay.
Like when I would have deliveries from like UPS, I would chase them down before they would get to my house. I would like go and prowl around the neighborhood and stop them and say, "Hey, give me my stuff. Here's my license."
Okay. Okay.
So I wanted to waste zero time at all.
Hmm. So once you finally got to the point of realizing that, this is it, now it comes time to tell others. Who did you come out to first?
Mm. The first person was my ex, and you know, because I was feeling confident in how things had been going recently,
Hmm.
I had started to talk to them more about and I think I had mentioned, you know, about the trans or cross dreamers, and they went and looked it up, and there was like is like at the beginning of February in 2019, it was pretty tense because the discussion started, and it was before like the crack, because I thought that it was still, I was this far in it, and it's not that I'm trans.
Yeah.
And you know, it's also, you know, the weight of what it's gonna do to my life, what this is gonna do to my relationship,
Yeah.
my family, and everything. And so
And
um
you had two kids at that point too, right?
yeah, yeah, teenager and almost. So the relationship was 17 marriage, and you know, 20 together
Together.
by
Mm.
that time. Just like it was tough conversations there. And when I when I first revealed it, I got panic from them,
Mm.
and um it made me backpedal and
Yeah.
say, no, I don't want to transition. And then it wasn't 8 or 9 days later that the egg really cracked.
Hmm.
And I told them that, I'm sorry, but I could not.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
it's
that,
sad because yeah, it seems like with her reaction, you had that you were triggered from that same initial thing when you were in second grade.
yeah.
That
Yeah,
same
and
shame
that
comes
had been
up.
a cycle in our relationship as well. Um so, it was immediately like go back into the same patterns.
Yeah,
And I would fawn to her to keep, like, make things more peaceful.
yeah.
And every time I did it, like, I was betraying myself. And I
Hmm.
finally realized that this is the only chance that I get to be me, you
Yeah.
know? Like, this is it. So,
Only get the one. Only get the one. Mhm.
ah, shut
Oh,
up.
sorry,
Yeah.
hon.
Like, it
I warned you about this yesterday. I didn't expect we'd get to it this quickly, though.
yeah, I mean, like, coming up on, like, 2 years here.
Yeah. Hmm. Well,
Okay.
congrats on the on 2 years, but I know how hard that is. We've got a lot of people in the chat that have been through similar things. There's a lot of loss involved in transitioning. There's a lot of shame, and I'm sorry that you had to
Yeah.
go through that.
I mean, at that point, I knew I was ready because I knew I was ready to give it all up.
Hmm. It was
Like,
important enough for you, to be true to yourself finally after
yeah,
all this time, that you knew that it was worth whatever you would lose.
or I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Hmm.
In a heartbeat.
Yeah, and it's not the sad and tough thing about being trans is that you are looking out at this and the future is so unsure, and you're
Yeah.
sort of sure that everything's going to crumble and the worst is going to happen, and yet you're so driven from the inside to move forward because you need to for yourself.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew from her reaction that it was going to be bad,
Yeah.
that it would be um a colossal, like, crash
Hmm.
for sure.
Well, this is the time where I'm kind of sad that I don't allow my guests to watch the chat, because there's just a huge outpouring of love in the chat for you. A lot of people sympathize with what you're going through, what you went through. Um, it's so hard to be true. Thank you for being here and being you and being true to yourself.
Thank
Um,
you.
a lot of people think you're very beautiful, of course.
Oh, shut up.
And Princess Prozac says, "Girl, cry away. We love you." So.
Oh, thank you. Thank all
Now
of
I
you.
gotta now I gotta figure out how to steer the interview over to something happy for a minute so you can
We
get
can do it. We
composed
can do
again.
it. I'm bipolar. Let's do this. I
Mm.
got this.
Well,
I practiced my whole life.
well, we can actually stay on the same topic and already get to something more positive, because I know who the second person you came out to was, and I know that they had a much different reaction. How did that go, and who
Oh,
was that?
yeah, that was my daughter. Um and yeah. Phew. Okay, I'm gonna get through this. I got this. That was my daughter. I came home, and it was um it was after my first visit with a therapist that specialized in gender identity issues and stuff.
Hmm.
And she was home from school, and it was before her brother had gotten home. And I was sitting in the kitchen, and she was hanging out there with me. And I was kind of speaking slowly, building up to telling her that I had gone to to talk to somebody about gender identity, and maybe I was trans. And the first thing that she said was, that must have been hard to tell her all of that.
Mhm.
And of course, I lose it at that point, and we embrace.
Mhm.
And she has, she and her brother have been my biggest cheerleaders. Um, they have a friend, a close friend that they had grown up with since we moved up to the Midwest back in 2014, and they have a trans masculine friend that my daughter went to school with at the time.
Mm.
And so my son, only being 9 at the time, and she was what, 15. um like they both had a, she's queer, so like she's very like in tune with the the whole community.
Mhm.
But even he had a reference, a frame of
Yeah.
reference for what that looked like socially for their friend. And he was he was I was I was very scared to tell him, because he's young, and I didn't know how he would respond.
Yeah.
But they're my biggest cheerleaders. Like,
Aw.
they are my soul,
Mm.
for sure.
So you mentioned that your daughter is queer. Was she out before you?
Yeah,
Mm.
she had been out since she was about 12. I
Wow.
think she had a girlfriend,
Hmm.
and they're still dating.
Hmm.
So
I think we've already established who the hardest person it was for you to come out to. Did you have any people in all of it, in work, in family and things like that, that you weren't expecting to support you, or at least to support you to the level they did?
I had some work people that I was a little nervous. They were like some of the last that I told, um, only because they're the you know kind of like, they're just dudes.
Yep.
And
Yep. We all
they're,
have those. We all have those friends that you're just like, oh, there's such a guy's guy that like, this is not
yeah,
gonna
how's
go
that gonna
well.
work?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had some that I was more nervous about. Like my team, I pretty much from from the start, like that was one of the first things that I did is uh I messaged all of them. I messaged them or called them individually, or caught up with them at one point when because I took about a week off of work right after I came out, to just kind of get my head in order.
Okay.
And when I came back, I went around to all of them one by one, and talked to them about it, and everybody was really great.
Hmm.
I've got my I would consider them family, a brother that I work with, that I actually brought up to work with me up here in the Midwest, from Tennessee, where we're from. And they were super supportive. Didn't really get it because they're cis, and they've
Uh-huh.
never wondered about their gender.
Hmm.
So, but like I'm very fortunate, very lucky that pretty much everybody in my life has been like, all my old friends. I don't have a lot of friends like up here where we are. But I've got a ton of friends that I was friends with in high school and stuff. And um well, in high school age, like, not really people from my high school.
Hmm.
um but yeah, and like everybody has been um so supporting and great. Like, I couldn't have asked for a better group of friends to come out to.
Oh, that's so wonderful. It's great when you have when you can find one place where you just get to feel comfortable and feel yourself and not have to worry about things. How did you come out at work? What was the method that you actually used there?
Um, I the first thing I did is went and talked to HR.
Okay.
I talked to them and said, "Hey, here's what's going on. I haven't talked to any of my peers yet. I haven't talked to my manager yet, and I'd like to talk to my manager with you."
Okay.
And so we scheduled an appointment where they were, my manager was brought in, and um, I sat down and I told them, and they were like, "Okay, I don't get it, but cool."
All
And
right.
and my like my the company that I work for is very inclusive, and we I've actually personally worked with um, a few trans folks in the engineering work that I've done. So it's not uncommon, like in our culture there. So that was, that gave me a level of confidence that if I were working in some of the positions that I might have held in the past, I wouldn't have been as comfortable with,
Okay.
just because, like there's those groups of people that you would just be so afraid for them to know that about you.
Hmm. And so then, so you had the meeting with HR and your
Hmm.
boss, and then you took some time off. Did you present completely as male before you took the time off, and then completely as female after that?
I think I took the time off before I came out, because there was like my ex didn't handle things well, and so she and the kids went home so she could have time to process things with her family.
Okay.
And so I went back to work after they came home, and I had pretty much, like, after that, like, my clothing changed. It was more like lesbian business casual.
Okay.
While I was still like in that in between stage, I had
Mm.
shaved my my not my head, my beard and mustache and everything off during that time off from work, and pretty soon after that, I think had somebody say to me, like, the first one of the first days, like, "Wow, you look really young now," without your facial hair.
Yeah.
And then they came back through a few days later, and I had um eyeliner on, and some foundation and stuff to start tamping down the dysphoria that was starting to rage within me. And they were like, "Oh, okay." And there's some of those folks that just kind of, like, from that point they were like Homer into the bushes. um but like most everybody, like, was cool about it, like, no, and nobody was really shitty about
Okay.
it. So,
That's awesome.
but yeah, it's like it pretty much like was like that. Like, I started wearing makeup and everything pretty much full time, and I think, right there at the beginning, there was like one day a couple of weeks in that I had to spend a lot of time getting everything in order, and I got to work, and I like pulled up and I parked, and I look at myself in the rearview mirror, and I'm like, I'm a joke. This is ridiculous. What am I doing?
Uh-huh.
And I panicked, and like that's like the only time that I ever like panicked about work, and I messaged my manager, and I drove home.
Mm.
I couldn't do it. Yeah. And looking back on it, I shouldn't have.
Mhm.
Like, the cringe that I experienced from, especially those like first few months, um, just scraping for a selfie at the right angle and the right lighting and everything to where I can feel a little good about myself. Um, those are the hardest ones
Mhm.
to go back over.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a very similar moment. That was my first day going into work wearing a skirt. I had not talked to HR or my boss. I was just doing it, and I'm driving in, and I'm having that same panic of like, wait, what the hell am I doing? Like, why are we doing this? Like, what is going on here? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And why do we have to do this in public? Like, what the hell? And it's just about it's just about taking a deep breath and realizing that this is important to you and this is something you felt like you had to do in the morning when you got dressed. So you just kind of got to go with it. And somehow I was able to kind of get over that last little hurdle that you weren't able to. And I just went in and here we are.
Here we are.
So, when did you first find community to belong to? So you'd looked at some things before, but when did you find community that you actually felt like you belonged in and had friends among? Are you still looking?
No, I'm thinking about that one because like I've got like the handful of friends that I do have in the city. um like there's a group of them like I've got that, you know, they're like one person's trans, like trans femme. I've got another non-binary friend. And so like I I don't know, community is kind of a, there's a lot of meaning in that word. I mean, I've and I don't know if it may be too big of a word. It's like I found people, you know,
Okay.
on Facebook and on Reddit, but you know, my ability to engage can be kind of kind of poor sometimes just because I run out of spoons. Um, especially for like I like long-winded things where I'm typing
Hmm.
is really tough for me. So I have a problem with like, you know, being able to like give people the responses that they deserve. So Reddit, you know, is not necessarily like I'll post pictures and stuff there and you know some comments back and forth. Facebook, there were a lot of like trans groups, like private groups that I got involved in at first, and that's probably like where it was initially like the most people that I could chat with and interact with about it. But I
Okay.
don't know if I would call that my community.
Hmm.
You know, that's like I feel like that's a more important word than what those people were. But you
Yeah.
know, there are people that, you know, I met through those avenues that I'm still like I have, you know, as personal friends on my timeline that, you know.
Hmm.
And really Facebook is like trans Facebook is pretty wild, yo. It can be it's like I've got a lot of like friends like through that now that are you know, like some of them are like I would do anything for these folks.
Okay.
So yeah, yeah, that's like I'll say Facebook, and I will say that I did find community there. I just had to suss that out.
Okay. Well, I wanted to give a plug to my own endeavor here. We're talking about community. You know, if you or anybody in the chat needs a community, a place where you just have a safe environment to be yourself and find friends, find family, have the ability to talk about absolutely anything. That's what the Transverse is all about. We have a Discord for that, and as soon as I get done talking this, we move on to the next question. I'll make sure it goes into the chat here. I'm sure one of the mods will put it in there. But it's open to anybody. It's trans, non-binary, intersex, specific, but it's open to everybody, allies, all of that. And it's just a place where we can celebrate each other and what we're going through, what we struggle with, and just everything else. What are you doing on a Tuesday? What are what are you reading? What are you watching? All that kind of fun stuff. So I just like to throw that plug out there for the Transverse and what we're doing. We're just trying to create a big community where people have that place to belong and to feel like they found a home. Okay, moving on. Did you have any kind of role model or confidant when you were coming out, right at that time? A specific person to turn to or to look up to?
I found people to look up to, like, by way of like inspiration from posts on Reddit. You know, when people would post timeline photos or selfies or whatever, and I would just, you know, swoon at at you know, like how successful their transition was going.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that can be a really like helpful but also really like um like kind of toxic thing.
Mm-hmm.
It can cause you to like have a lot of like dysphoria and just be really down on yourself because, you know, waiting is the hardest part of the beginning of this journey. You know, in that first like 6 to 9 months it's so hard
Mm-hmm.
um to just just slow down and
Allow things to happen
yeah,
where they're going to.
yeah, yeah. And you know, I had some, you know, and there were specific like people that would post and some Instagram people as well that I would follow that were, you know, pretty inspirational. I didn't have like a lot of folks, I guess, that you know, that I was close to or like on a personal basis. But you know, the friend of my children that is transmasculine,
Mm-hmm.
I told him, and it was true that his bravery in coming out um was was something that definitely inspired me to be brave enough as well. And I have a like a friend from back home in Tennessee, and his daughter came out and transitioned 5 or 6 years ago, I guess. It's
Hmm.
been a while. And you know, she was as well, you know, one of the people that really gave me like pause that somebody close to me in my life that was doing it.
Hmm. What role has therapy played in your transition? Have you been able to see a therapist throughout this?
I saw a therapist for the first almost year. Um, and I stopped going to see them around the time that COVID started.
Okay.
I um I would say that therapy was more helpful for me to like to process the feelings, you know, of the things that I was dealing with, um, in the collapse of my relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and just in, you know, life in general. I guess the for therapy, I would go in and just start like usually how our sessions would go is I would go in and sit down and I would literally just start running my mouth about everything that I had been feeling or experiencing in the last like week. And like she would sit there and be like, okay, okay. And every once in a while she would ask a question, but it was more like I think it was more important that it was somebody that I had a like who knew my story, like who had a consistent like understanding of my story and what I was going through, and you know they know about these things that I'm telling them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, yeah, I haven't really needed therapy, or well, I haven't had therapy in, you know, almost a year now.
Okay.
Maybe I need some from time to time. I'm doing much better now.
Nice. What were some of the key fears that you ran into in your transition and, probably talked over with your therapist?
That I was worthy, that I was worth it, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that you know that I was, that it was okay for me to be selfish and do this. Like that was probably one of the hardest things, is that I had I have a pattern of giving myself to, a situation.
Hmm.
And
I think that's an
when go ahead.
let's say I think that's another common theme for us is always giving of ourselves and trying to kind of be what everybody else wants, and making that shift to looking inward and saying, well, what do I want? What do I need to be happy? Is a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And you know, not feeling guilty for like for being selfish like that.
Hmm.
Because it's not your fault.
Yeah.
And we deserve to be happy.
Yes, we do. So you got to start just bang right out of the gun once your egg cracked and you realized, because you'd had this building up so strongly for you your whole life. Have your transition goals shifted as you've gone through, or from that moment did you know exactly what you wanted?
I don't even know if I put like thought to it. I just slid into it. Like
Hmm.
this that you see, and I mean the pictures that I post, and the stories that I post along with them, like in on social media, like it's me. And I don't really understand, like I was always kind of, I would say that I had a flourish in my behavior or my step. Like I had a friend of mine, like that I was really close to, that has the trans daughter. Like when I came out to him, he was like, "Oh, you know, I always knew there was something about you." And he used to say that he would call me flamboyant. Oh, yeah. And thought that I might be gay until like I get married and have kids. Like it's like, well, maybe Chris isn't gay. um I was, just in a different way. um uh yeah, so like this, and like my style and everything, it was like I had uh, I had been such an admirer of this caricature, this archetype,
Uh-huh.
whatever, of person, um that once like things started to come together, it was just like it was natural. Like it didn't feel like, it never felt forced, like the way I behave. And it's like I've like always been a gesticulator. I've always kind of been like, I've had a higher voice
Mm.
my whole life. I um i remember like things that I had done around people that made them kind of like, they wondered, they wondered actually if I had a lot of sisters. Like
Uh-huh.
things like, like this kind of like swooping out, like when somebody's trying to like tickle me or something like that. And they
Hmm.
wondered that if I had sisters, and I didn't, and they were like,
Hmm.
okay. So like that's like one of the things that like came back to mind, is like I've always kind of been like this.
Uh-huh.
And I I I I would have to, like, when I walked. This is the weirdest thing. When I would walk, a lot of times I elbow in your hip, and arm out and everything, not really thinking about it. And well, I would think about it, and when I would drop my hands back down to the side, and I would be, you know, I would mask back up, and I would like I would you know start playing the other role.
Yeah.
Um, so when I finally was able to, you know, take the veil off, ah, here I am. And so,
So are there any key aspects of your presentation, or what you get to do in your daily life that are is there one thing that's the particular thing that makes you feel most valid?
I mean, makes me feel the most valid. My boobs. um, because they just kind of came along with me.
Uh-huh.
You know, they've been enhanced as you know along the trip, definitely. But when when I first started transitioning and I was wearing a 44C bra from the get go, that felt pretty good.
Yeah.
That felt pretty good. Um, I would say now, like body wise, my booty is pretty good. I had like such a flat butt as a boy. It was so sad. Like
Mhm.
pants would not stay on me at all or anything. And so now that I've got like a little shake back there, it's great. Um, as far as like my clothing and like my style is it's very consistent, I guess.
Mhm.
And that's just because like I'll find something I like and buy 10 of them.
Uh-huh.
So I don't have to think about it anymore. Um, I used to do a lot of makeup and stuff, and a lot of like shadow, like eye makeup, and I always found that the more that I would do that, like the more I wouldn't feel. I mean, it's not that it invalidated me. It was just like I felt like it was too much.
Mhm.
And so now, like literally, the only thing that I do is I have to like draw my eyebrows on because I come from a weak bloodline apparently, where I only get them like over here, and my wings, and
Mhm.
I use some mascara. Like lipstick makes me feel weird when I have it on.
Oh,
I think it makes me look older, and I'm
okay.
old enough as it is, so I'm not gonna help that along.
Definitely feel that. So on the other side of that, is there anything these days? Because like I said, in what the chat is saying, you're beautiful. You have a feminine voice. You have a perfectly feminine figure. You came with the boobs, which is just unfair. Is there anything these days that make you feel dysphoric?
Sometimes, like my forehead, like I have a little bit of a ridge, but
Hmm.
like I like my daughter, and my daughter has my forehead, so
Yeah.
like that's not really you know something that's too bad. I um I had a lot of gray hair, and um I haven't had laser in over a year probably.
Okay.
I had I think 6 or 7 sessions and was able to knock out most of the dark hairs.
Oh,
But I
nice.
have gray hair, and
Mhm.
I pluck.
Ooh, yeah.
And so when things are not going well in that area, and I miss a couple of days of exfoliation and stuff, I can it can be kind of
Mhm.
um but it's looking pretty good right now.
There
So
you go. And like we talked about before the show, the camera hides a lot, so it's all good.
yeah, it does. I it's as long as like I'm not like harsh lighting and everything like still can make me feel kind of icky, but
Mm,
it's been a long time that since like my appearance has really been hard to deal with.
mhm. In your transition, what were some of the biggest hurdles that you had to overcome or things that you had to get used to, kind of learning curves? And how did you overcome those?
Probably the biggest one that I had to overcome was going from basically invisible. you know it's like the way that I looked before was not. I mean, I can look back and say he was kind of cute now,
Mm,
but it wasn't anything. I was noticed, but not in ways that I wanted to be. I actually wanted to be more invisible then.
interesting. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Um, but going from, that, you know, almost or actually invisible to being very, very seen, and accepting, like, feeling like when I looked at myself in the mirror and be like, oh, I feel cute, but
Yeah.
then never like wanting to like honestly acknowledge it, or like when other people would tell me not wanting to accept it or acknowledge it. And for a while, when I was still softening up and everything, and I would take my makeup and all that off at the end of the day, and the wigs, especially when I was still wearing those, and seeing like me, and
Mm.
still seeing the dude there, and like
Yeah.
that was tough. Um, and but yeah, I don't know. It's like it's still hard for me to believe that this is me, and that people see, because I'll never get to see myself for the first time.
Hmm.
I'll never get to like experience what it's like to first lay eyes on me. And
Hmm.
so it's hard for me to believe, like, and you meet people, like you pass by them like every day, and you've never seen somebody, and you see them and you're struck by them. You're like, oh, like,
Yeah.
wow, they have a like very striking look. And I'll never get that. So I
Hmm.
don't, like,
Yeah.
there's always doubt
Yeah.
that what
Because it's
everybody else
like
is
you said,
seeing is
it's
not
so
what.
it's oh sorry. It's so gradual for you.
Yeah.
We go through it's a slow it's a slow slog. It's a daily process, a little bit of change, and then at some point, like you start to feel that where, like you said, where you're seen in a different way, and you're like, oh, okay, and you start to understand that that's what's going on. But again, because you don't have that light switch on off, it's a gradual thing. You don't get to see that, and that's, I think that makes it harder. I think that's where we have the more of that dysphoria, because we don't get to just, you know, experience that first thing and go, oh yeah, that's a woman, it's good. You see the gradual build and you're like, yeah, it's more womanly, but it's, I don't know.
Well, yeah, and then when you turn heads, like, why are they turning heads? Like, is it because, they see something that, I should have hidden away?
Uh-huh.
You don't know what's going through their minds, so you don't know if they're gawking or like amazed. And that's
Or
kind of,
clocking you, or yeah, like
yeah,
you said.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, like, that's always like kind of that. I mean, the place where I live is a very good place for people like us.
Mm,
Um, I would say it's one of the best parts of the country for it.
mm,
Um, I've never been um, I've never been messed with in any kind of ill way. Not to say that it's not in the city, but um, just in general, like, it's really accepting. I've never
mm,
been, except maybe like one time. I think I was out and I had my transgender pen on, and I think somebody noticed it. And when I was walking out of the convenience store, they were like, "Hey, sir," or whatever. And I turned around and got in my car, like, I heard it, but I didn't respond to it or anything. And then when I turned around to get into the car, they were like, "Oh," and they kind of shuffled off like toward their vehicle. So I don't know if I don't even know if they were really like, being crappy.
uh-huh.
And if that was the case, I've never had anybody go out of their way to, make me feel bad.
Mm,
And I'm very, very lucky for
yeah,
that.
that's awesome. Did you have any ways where you felt your transition lived up to your expectations, or particularly lived up to your expectations, or in any ways has fallen short?
I'm so blessed. Like, it's literally like this, like, is a dream come true.
Mm,
Like, that's the only way that I can process it, because this is the person that I've always wanted to be. Like, hands down. I always had like, so I always looked up to like chunky, like fun, nerdy girls that, aren't prissy, but are like cute and hot, and like, like, and that's me.
you made it. You made it. You got
I
there.
made it. How? Like, how? And the guilt of that. Like, how? Why did I deserve it?
Mm,
Not that, like, I don't, it's like I try not to like, because nobody, nobody likes a sore winner. Like, I don't want to
Mhm.
say that, you know, I don't know, that feels like ish, to this situation. Like, I don't want to sit here and, like, I'm not gonna say that, like, the things that people see and like are very obviously me. I'm not gonna say I don't have those, but like, whoa,
Mhm.
how? And, is it gonna last? Like,
Yeah.
that's probably one thing that goes through my head. Like, I have this feeling that like it's gonna slip away,
Huh.
and or that I'm gonna wake up and the dream's gonna be over.
Yeah.
And every day I I
Another
wake up
gift.
and yeah, yeah.
Mm. Yeah, well, I don't think that there's anybody in the chat watching this show that feels in any way that you're bragging or gloating over what you have, okay? You're getting a lot of wonderful compliments in the chat you have the whole time. People think you're both a beautiful person on the inside and on the outside. Your boobs are causing a lot of jealousy.
No.
but but nobody thinks
But
that you don't deserve it because you're wonderful. So just get over that. So, as we wrap up the cry portion of the show,
let's see if we can get another one out.
this is the easy one for that. What advice do you have for young or closeted trans people out there?
Find someone that you can trust. Believe in yourself. Be patient and kind to yourself. And maybe don't fall for the some of the tropes. I think can be kind of toxic.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of tropes of transness when you first get into the scene, I guess. I feel like that a lot of people play into that, and sometimes it's not necessarily appropriate. Sometimes it's not necessarily healthy
Mhm.
um, to do those things. Just stick to the plan.
Mhm.
Stay in touch with your doctors and keep your levels like monitored. And wait, estrogen works, testosterone works. Like, it will get you, you know, farther down the road than you ever thought possible. And I would, if I had anything to add, I would say be safe, because um when we start advertising ourselves, and our new identity, it can attract a lot of um people that don't necessarily have your best interests at heart.
Mhm.
you know like, be safe, like, physically and you know mentally and emotionally too. Like, it's such a sensitive time, and especially if somebody has just started hormones. Like, there's a lot there and a lot going on. That first year is just so emotional.
Yeah.
Find somebody that you can reach out to, when you're not feeling settled, because when we're like that is when we're likely to push ourselves to do something that we might regret.
Mhm.